Happy morning, students. So again, today we'll continue the further part of this nervous system. As we discussed yesterday, nervous cell or neuron, its structure. When the nervous cell, neuron is observed under microscope, what are the part it has, how the nerve cell, neuron looks like, that everything we discussed yesterday's class. But today we are going to discuss about mainly these two things, that is types of neurons. Neuron, nerve cell we can call otherwise. Neuron can be otherwise called as nerve cell. And the important property of the neuron or nerve cell also we discussed yesterday. Nerve cell or neuron is unique than other cells of our body because neuron or nerve cells, they have lost the capacity to divide. Nerve cell or neuron, they divide only once during the embryonic stage. This unique feature of this cell, nerve cell, we know that. Now, let us take types of neuron based on their structure. And here, the second theme, the first theme is types of neuron based on their structure. And types of neuron, the second theme is types of neuron based on their functions. Types of neuron based on their structures are three types: unipolar neuron, or you can call it as nerve cell. Nerve cell. Bipolar neuron or bipolar nerve cell. Multipolar neuron or multipolar nerve cell. So these are the types of neuron based on their structure. Yesterday we discussed the structure of neuron. In the nerve cell, neuron is observed under microscope. It has centrally a cell body. The cell body is filled with cytoplasm, and around the cell body, several branches arising. These branches are called dendrites, and a long fiber also arises from the cell body, that is called axon. Is it? The axon is further covered with a box-like structures we call myelin sheath. So the cell body or cycle of the neuron, nerve cell, has a dense spot at the center that we call as nucleus. Around the nucleus, nasal granules will be. So these are the parts of a neuron. When the neuron generally observed under microscope, it shows these parts. We are able to see these parts, such as the branches arising from the cell body cytron or dendrites, and a long fiber extending further down towards the nerve fiber, that is axon. Like this, generally the neuron, nerve cell looks like this when we observe it under microscope. But here, types of neuron based on their structures. For example, which neuron we can call as unipolar neuron? Unipolar neuron, it has a single and very short fiber. It has a single and very short fiber. For example, unipolar neuron, we can see a single and a short fiber like this. And the bipolar neuron, here dendrites are absent. In unipolar neuron, dendrites are absent. This will be the cell body and one long fiber arises from the cell body. This kind of nerve cell is there. Without dendrites, then we call it as unipolar neuron. And bipolar neuron will have axon, a long axon will be there, and there will be a cell body like this. This is a bipolar neuron, and it will have dendrites. One dendrite, one axon at centrally located cell body. One dendrite, one axon, and centrally located cell body. This is bipolar neuron. A multipolar neuron, this you can take example. Several dendrites are arising from the cell body. This we can take as a multipolar neuron or multipolar nerve cell. So these are the types of nerve cells based on their structure. It doesn't mean that all the nerve cells, all the neurons look alike. Based on their structural arrangement, they are further classified into three categories such as unipolar neuron, bipolar neuron and multipolar neuron. What is the difference here? Multipolar neuron will have many multiple number of dendrites arising from the cell body. In bipolar neuron, we find single dendrite and single fiber arising from the cell body, that is axon. Here in unipolar neuron, there are no dendrites, only a single long axon arising from the cell body. So these are the types of neurons based on their structure. Now the second thing what we have to discuss is the types of neurons based on their functions. As neurons are classified into three categories such as unipolar neuron, bipolar neuron and multipolar neuron based on the structure. Similarly, what kind of functions they perform, they are further classified into three divisions such as sensory neuron, second one motor neuron and the third one is connecting neuron. These are the types of neurons based on the functions they perform. The various functions they perform, based on the functions, they are further classified into three divisions such as sensory, motor and connecting. Now here, this connecting neuron or nerve cell can be otherwise called as interneuron, the other name to it. You can call it as connecting neuron or interneuron, or it can be called as associating. See, these many names are there. For connecting neuron, we can call it as interneuron or it can be called as associating neuron. So these three types of neurons are based on the basis of functions they perform. What are the functions? Let us take first sensory neuron. What is the function of sensory neuron? When any stimulus is applied on the body, as we know, stimulus and response we discussed already yesterday. What is nerve impulse? When any stimulus is applied on the body, at that moment, the sensory neuron generates a nerve impulse. What is nerve impulse? A small amount of electric potential generated by sensory neuron. When it generates, whenever any stimulus is applied on our body, that is called nerve impulse. So sensory neuron is responsible to generate nerve impulse. From where to where? From effector organ. Effector organ, that nerve impulse generated by sensory neuron goes from effector organ, it generates point of generation. What is effector organ? The site, the location, the place where the stimulus is applied. Suppose this is our body part. Here the stimulus, external stimulus is applied. Then this body part is termed as effector organ. Are you able to understand? When any stimulus is applied, here, the site, the location where the stimulus is applied, that part, that site, that location is termed as effector organ. So sensory neuron, what it does, it generates nerve impulse from effector organ to spinal cord. From spinal cord, that nerve impulse further goes to brain. So this is the function performed by sensory neuron. So what is the function of sensory neuron? Number one, generating nerve impulse. It generates nerve impulse. That nerve impulse generated by sensory neuron goes from effector organ to spinal cord. From spinal cord it further goes to brain. This is the function of sensory neuron. The second type of neuron is motor neuron. Motor neuron is quite opposite to this. See, it generates nerve impulse back from brain to the spinal cord, from spinal cord back to the effector organ. See it. Means the sensory neuron is generating the nerve impulse. That nerve impulse generated by sensory neuron is going from effector organ to spinal cord, from spinal cord further going to the brain. But in the case of motor neuron, it is bringing back the responses from brain to spinal cord, from spinal cord back to the effector organ. One way of sending the information to the brain from effector organ, this work is done by sensory neuron. And motor neuron generate nerve impulse from brain to spinal cord, from spinal cord back to the effector organ. This is the function performed by motor neuron. And third type of neuron, that is connecting neuron or interneuron, or we can call it as associating neuron also. This is the connectivity between sensory neuron and motor neuron. This neuron help to connect this neuron with this. For example, sensory neuron is there. This is the sensory neuron, and here it is the motor neuron. These two neurons, sensory neuron and motor neuron, both are connected with the help of the third one, connecting neuron or motor neuron. So what is the function of this? Connecting neuron connects sensory neuron with motor neuron, or we can call it as interneuron or associating neuron. Likewise, what happens? Suppose this is sensory neuron, this is connecting motor, sensory connecting motor, like this, a chain of thread, a fiber, long fiber forms, and that we call as nerve. As we know, nerves, cranial nerves and spinal nerves. The nerves which arises from the brain we call cranial nerves, and the nerve which arises from the spinal cord of our body we call spinal nerves. In this way, nerves are formed by connecting sensory neuron, motor neuron with the help of connecting neuron. So I hope you understand the functions. So based on the functions, neurons are classified into three categories such as sensory, motor and connecting. Sensory neuron generate nerve impulse from the effector organ to the spinal cord, from spinal cord to the brain. When it generates, whenever any stimulus is applied on the body, generating the nerve impulse from effector organ to spinal cord, from spinal cord to brain is a function of sensory neuron. And motor neuron bring back the sensory information, nerve impulse from brain back to the spinal cord, from spinal cord it come back to the effector organ. This is the function performed by motor neuron. And connecting neuron connect sensory neuron with motor neuron. This neuron connect this and this. These two nerve cells, neurons, are connected with each other, as example shown here, with the help of connecting neuron. So these are the functions performed by these three types of nerve cells or neurons. So based on the different various functions performed by the neuron or nerve cells, based on the functions performed, they are differentiated into three types such as sensory neuron, motor neuron and connecting neuron. And here, based on the structure, they are differentiated into unipolar, bipolar neuron and multipolar neuron. So this is about types of neuron based on the structure and types of neuron based on the functions.